I think it's right to revisit what we saw this afternoon because there are some important elements that, for those who love football, deserve to be explored further. Bologna is extraordinary, an absolute lesson in football, in depth, length, and width. This is a team playing as if they've memorized everything like a computer, as if the files are running automatically, and that's thanks to the great work of Vincenzo Italiano. I have rarely seen Napoli in such difficulty, and rarely has a team won a match by tailoring it to themselves, in the sense that they played it exactly as they had prepared, following a game plan crafted by someone who studies, a game plan executed by a team that goes onto the pitch without improvising, a game plan focused on the field and not on what happens off it. Because in the first half, we could even talk about balance, but Bologna was always in absolute control, as if they had memorized the right moments to step in and steal the show. Cambiaghi's entrance broke the game open because his assist for Dalin, the first goal, was extraordinary, but Bologna had control of the field, even after losing their starting goalkeeper Skorupski, even after having to lose others along the way. Rowe as well. But Bologna has a deep squad, a team built with attention to detail, and above all, it has a guiding hand. A hand on the team, a hand that you can see. This is the beauty of football. When you can see the coach's touch, when you understand that there is deep work behind it, when there are no excuses, when you go out on the pitch knowing exactly what you have to do. And even though everything is almost coded, you still manage to find a stroke of genius within a perfectly prepared setup. A setup is like a table laid out in the best possible way. Because Cambiaghi changed the game, because Bologna has this ability to make the right choices, because making substitutions at the right moment, even if out of necessity, but at the right moment, and picking the ideal players becomes fundamentally important. It seemed like Bologna had lost an irreplaceable piece. Cambiaghi is going through a phase of absolute maturity from a technical and tactical point of view, thanks to plays he had already shown at Empoli. And certainly Atalanta's decision to bring him in was a stroke of genius. If you look, check, and review the substitutions, the technical mix is all tailored to fit. So, congratulations, because 21 points is an extraordinary result as I speak to you. We still have to wait for the results from Roma and Inter. And so we'll make a final assessment. The transfer market is also paying off, especially the choices that were made not to give up. Remember Ukumi, the summer soap opera, the release clause that eventually expired, the English sirens, the Premier League that was after him? Bologna couldn't afford to let go of Buscema, or rather of Ukumi after Buscema, because Buscema was already promised to Napoli and it's a bit of an accordion situation. The beauty of football, the pleasure of watching a match, of seeing things for yourself, of not getting bored, of realizing that there's real work behind it, the groundwork laid by a coach who needed to bring home a trophy and did so, and who can now enjoy himself because between the Europa League and these well-oiled mechanisms, there are no masters of the league for the top four spots, not for second, not for first, and even more so, at the moment, there simply aren't any. But even for the Champions League spots, you can have fun, and congratulations to Bologna. As a counterpoint, there's a recognizable Napoli. A Napoli that probably made some choices in hindsight that are quite questionable, but it's not just a matter of choices. Right now, this Napoli is stuck in a bottleneck, a tunnel, a dead end. They don't have ideas that are typical of Conte. The double commitment has probably had an impact, and I think that on the pitch, let's use the right language instead of words that are just blown away by the wind, because if we have to find a different reason for every defeat, clearly we're getting it wrong. With the double commitment and over the long haul, Napoli is clearly struggling, just as Conte has struggled in his career, though no one can question him as a coach, of course. But today, the difference was subtle. By the way, if we want to split hairs like some people do, Bologna actually had 48 hours less rest because they played in the Europa League on Thursday. So let's tell it like it is, both ways. And yet, even though they played 48 hours later, Bologna looked like they'd just come out of the washing machine, fresh, crisp, polished, convincing, while Napoli looked like a makeshift team. You can't single anyone out for praise because everyone shares responsibility. They were all off their game. But the idea that what remains is the sense of a team concept that simply doesn't exist. So, with his skill, it will be up to Conte to focus on the work rather than anything else, not to look for excuses that just don't hold up right now. Because in the summer, everything Conte asked for was done, because the new signings are behind schedule, because it's unclear who among the new arrivals, apart from Ovilundu, can actually be decisive and take center stage. Because now some people will miss De Bruyne, but the same problems existed even when De Bruyne was there. Today, we really saw the Italian professor at the podium, metaphorically smoking a cigarette or a cigar, giving a masterclass in football. We have to say it, we have to be honest, we have to acknowledge the coach and the work of a coach whom I have followed closely throughout my career, who has gone through every possible and imaginable stage of apprenticeship, who has lived and breathed football every minute. He breathed it in during his time in Serie C. He breathed it in Trapani, winning. He breathed it in at Spezia, winning. He breathed it in at Fiorentina, where he had the fault, in quotes, of not winning a trophy. Then, as luck would have it, he won the trophy at Bologna, and he continues to transmit things that, in my opinion, will allow him to have an enlightened and brilliant career. But right now, there's Bologna, and Bologna is keeping him for itself. Congratulations, because these lessons, they're good not just for football, but for those who watch, for those who want to see real football, for those who don't want to hear words, chatter, jokes, situations that, in my opinion, have no reason to exist. The draw between Genoa and Fiorentina was spectacular because it ended 2-2, but it was also born out of fear, with two penalties, Genoa taking the lead, then falling behind, Genoa trying to win, but also Fiorentina with Piccoli, who broke his duck, scored a goal and could have scored another, and Leali's save was outstanding. I wouldn't say that both teams would have signed up for a point before the match, because everyone tries to win, especially if you have 4 points and Genoa has a few more than Fiorentina, but it does allow them to go into the break relying on their new coaches. Given that it will be a very patient job with few points on the board, De Rossi and Vanoli respectively will be able to work. It would have been a disaster for Fiorentina. Losing would have been a little less of a disaster for Genoa, who had won in Reggio Emilia. This draw is just a small comfort, a little sweetener that stretches things out. And above all, it extends patience, it extends prospects, ambitions, it strengthens them a bit, but then you need to get some wins, because with draws, you don't get anywhere. A quick note on Atalanta. Atalanta is unwatchable. Juric's words are also a result of the recent outcomes, except for Marseille, where the team showed some pride. But in the league, Atalanta has sometimes wasted opportunities, sometimes could have won, but lacks a clear identity. They have 13 points in 11 matches, the worst points average in recent years. Obviously, you might say, well, sure, before there was Gasperini and now there's Juric. I allowed myself to say in the summer that hiring Juric meant taking a leap into the unknown. So the evaluations will be made, not because Juric lacks value, but because there are too many unfinished things at Atalanta, because there were other coaches available, because Atalanta wanted to force something that rightly they defended and can legitimately defend, even though now the evaluations seem inevitable to me. As I said before, these two matches were going to be crucial for drawing some conclusions, and the conclusions are not good. Also because it seems to me that the team speaks a completely different language from the coach. One is at the North Pole and the other is at the equator. The team is at the equator and the coach is at the North Pole. Today there was a flatness even in the way the team approached the match, and in the lack of reaction there was none. You started off with a chance, but then you didn't react because you gave up, and if you gave up, it's likely because your mind is bogged down. I had told you about Palladino as a possibility because he had already been considered last summer before coming to terms with Juric in the sense of reaching an agreement, with Thiago Motta also on the list. For the record, I mentioned that Roberto Mancini was in the stands in Marseille, either as an interested or uninterested spectator, waiting to see if he will accept offers from abroad. But Atalanta, he can decide freely. If he doesn't make some serious assessments now, it means he hasn't understood the problem, and he allows Atalanta to do as it sees fit. but an enlightened club like Atalanta cannot help but thoroughly evaluate these absolute embarrassments. I'll keep you updated. Thank you. We'll see each other again very soon, and I always wish you all the very best. Bye.